stories spoke of monsters called humans, and then one smiled at me. The warning ambassador Tyrex stood before the great crystal council of the Quillan Collective, his chitinous plates shifting nervously as the elders delivered his new assignment. The chamber was silent except for the soft clicking of mandibles, a sound that usually brought him comfort but now only heightened his anxiety. "You have been chosen for a great responsibility," Elder Zinthia announced, her ancient carapace gleaming under the ceremonial lights. "The humans have requested a cultural exchange program. You will be our representative." Tyrex felt his compound eyes widen in shock. Humans. The word alone sent ripples of fear through his body. Every Quillan child grew up hearing stories about the terrifying species from the small blue planet called Earth. They were the monsters of the modern galaxy, creatures whose very existence defied the peaceful nature of civilized space. "Honored Elder," Tyrex began, his voice trembling slightly, "surely there are others more qualified. I am young, inexperienced in such delicate matters." Elder Cormath leaned forward, his scarred exoskeleton a testament to his many years of service. "That is precisely why you were chosen. Your generation must learn to navigate this new reality. The humans are here, whether we like it or not. We must understand them." Over the next 3 days, Tyrex underwent intensive briefings about human behavior and history. What he learned terrified him. The humans came from a death world, a planet so hostile that it had forged them into something unprecedented in galactic history. They were persistence predators, creatures who hunted by simply refusing to give up. Their bodies produced combat stimulants naturally, flooding their systems with chemicals that dulled pain and enhanced aggression during conflict. The military. Advisors showed him footage from the Krovan War, a conflict that had ended just 2 galactic cycles ago. The Krovan Empire, one of the most powerful military forces in known space, had made the mistake of attacking a human colony world. What followed was a campaign of such brutal efficiency that it became required study material in every military academy across the galaxy. Tyrex watched in horror as human soldiers fought on despite injuries that would have killed any other species. He saw them drag wounded comrades to safety while under heavy fire, their faces twisted in expressions of rage and determination. He witnessed their famous battle cry, a sound that reportedly made even the fearless Krovan warriors hesitate. "They do not know when to surrender," the military advisor explained. "Pain does not stop them. Fear does not slow them. They simply keep coming until either they win or they are completely destroyed." But the stories that truly frightened Tyrex were the ones about human unpredictability. The Syntherian Dominion had tried to negotiate a trade agreement with humanity, believing they could manipulate the younger species. The humans had listened politely to every proposal, nodded at all the appropriate moments, and then systematically dismantled every Syntherian trade route in their sector of space when they discovered the Dominion was using child labor. "They have this thing they call morality," Elder Zinthia explained during one session. "It overrides logic, profit, and even self-preservation. You cannot predict what will trigger it, and once activated, they become absolutely inflexible, the way." Diplomatic advisors warned him about human body language. "Never show your teeth," they instructed. To humans, this is an aggressive gesture. Their own smile, showing teeth, can mean either friendliness or a threat. Context is everything, and understanding that context is nearly impossible for non-humans. Tyrex learned about human emotions, a bewildering array of chemical reactions that influence their every decision. They could go from calm to violent in seconds. They felt something called anger, which could make them irrational and dangerous. They experienced grief that could consume them entirely. They possessed love, an emotion so powerful that humans would die for those they felt it toward. "Remember," Elder Cormath said during their final meeting, "humans are not like us. They do not think in terms of colony and collective. Each human is an individual, capable of making decisions that contradict their own species. This makes them chaotic and unreliable." The journey to the diplomatic station took 4 standard days. Tyrex spent most of that time reviewing his materials and trying to calm his racing nervous system. His ship's computer had compiled every recorded human interaction, and he studied them obsessively. He watched humans negotiate trade deals, saw them respond to emergencies, observed their strange social rituals. One recording particularly disturbed him. It showed a human mother whose child had been taken by slavers. The woman had tracked the slavers across 3 star systems, fighting through their defenses alone, and had killed 17 armed guards to recover her offspring. When authorities questioned her afterward, she showed no remorse. "They took my daughter," she had said simply, as if that explained everything. As his ship approached the diplomatic station, Tyrex could see other vessels docked around the massive structure. Quilin ships with their elegant curves, Vorath cruisers with their practical designs, Menthari science vessels with their distinctive energy signatures, and there, standing out among them all, was a human ship. The vessel was smaller than he expected, sleek and efficient. It bore markings that his computer identified as belonging to the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. Tyrex stared at it through his viewport, wondering what kind of creature waited inside. The docking procedure was smooth and professional. Station staff, a mix of various species, guided his ship into its designated berth. Tyrex gathered his belongings, checked his translation device one final time, and made his way to the airlock. His legs felt weak, and he had to consciously control the nervous clicking of his mandibles. The station's interior was designed to accommodate multiple species, with adjustable gravity fields and atmospheric controls. Tyrex followed the illuminated path toward the diplomatic quarter, where he was scheduled to meet his human counterpart. Other diplomats passed him in the corridors, some nodding and greeting, others too absorbed in their own concerns to notice him. Finally, he reached the designated meeting chamber. The door was marked with symbols from a dozen languages, including the angular script of Earth. Tyrex stood before it for a long moment, gathering his courage. Inside that room was one of the monsters from the stories, a creature capable of terrible violence and incomprehensible behavior. He activated the door chime and waited. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Tyrex stepped inside. The room was configured for comfortable interaction between different species. Adjustable seating, multiple atmospheric zones, translation equipment mounted on the walls. And there, standing near the window overlooking the station's docking bay, was a human. She was smaller than he expected. The briefings had shown him images of humans, but seeing one in person was different. She had dark hair pulled back from her face, and skin the color of the sand on his homeworld's northern continent. She wore simple diplomatic attire, black and professional, with a small badge identifying her as Ambassador Sarah Chen of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. She turned as he entered, and Tyrex froze. This was the moment the advisors had warned him about. Human first impressions were critical and often incomprehensible to other species. Then Sarah did something that changed everything. Her face transformed, the corners of her mouth lifting, her eyes crinkling slightly at the edges. She was showing her teeth, but there was nothing threatening about the gesture. It radiated warmth and welcome in a way that transcended species barriers. She smiled. "Ambassador Tyrex," she said, her voice carrying through the translation device in tones that sounded genuinely pleased. "I'm so happy to finally meet you. Welcome to the station." Tyrex stood motionless, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This was supposed to be a monster, a creature of rage and violence. But the being before him felt more like the gentle Menthari philosophers or the peaceful Vorath farmers. The smile, despite showing teeth, carried no aggression. It was an offering of friendship, as clear as any greeting he had ever received. He began, his voice catching. "Thank you, Ambassador Chen. I am honored to be here." Sarah's smile widened slightly, and she gestured to the seating area. "Please call me Sarah. I hope the journey wasn't too difficult. I know our species' reputations might have made this assignment somewhat concerning." The casual acknowledgement of his fears caught Tyrex off guard. Humans were supposed to be unpredictable and dangerous, yet here was one openly addressing the very concerns he had been trying to hide. "I confess," Tyrex said carefully, settling into a seat designed for his body structure. "The stories about humans are rather frightening to my people." Sarah nodded, her expression becoming more serious but no less kind. I understand. Our species has done things that frightened others. We fought wars that were brutal and uncompromising. But there's context to those stories, Ambassador. Context I hope we'll have time to explore together. She moved to her own seat, her movements fluid and controlled. Nothing about her suggested the violent rage the briefings had described. She poured 2 cups of liquid from a container, offering one to him. This is tea, she explained. A mild herbal blend that should be compatible with Quillen biology. I checked with our xenobiologist to make sure. It's a human tradition to share refreshments during first meetings. Tyrex accepted the cup carefully, studying the amber liquid. A tradition. Humans had traditions just like every civilized species. They thought about compatibility and consideration for other biology. They offered hospitality. The stories, Sarah continued, sitting back in her chair. They tell you we're monsters, and in a way they're not wrong. Humans can be monstrous when we need to be, but that's only one part of who we are. She looked directly at him with those strange binocular eyes, and Tyrex saw something in them that the briefings had never mentioned. He saw intelligence, certainly, and awareness, but he also saw something that looked remarkably like hope. I'm hoping, Sarah said softly, that during your time here, you'll discover the other parts too, the parts that the scary stories leave out. Tyrex felt something shift inside him. The fear that had accompanied him from his homeworld didn't disappear entirely, but it diminished. This human, this supposed monster, was reaching out with openness and honesty. She acknowledged her species' capacity for violence while simultaneously demonstrating their capacity for kindness. I would like that, Tyrex said, and he realized he meant it. I would very much like to understand. Sarah's smile returned, warm and genuine, and in that moment Ambassador Tyrex began to understand that perhaps the stories about humans were incomplete. They spoke of monsters, yes, but they failed to mention that these same monsters could smile with such sincerity that it bridged the gap between entirely different forms of life. The revelation, the following days passed in a way that continuously surprised Tyrex. Sarah proved to be an excellent guide to human culture, patient with his questions and thoughtful in her explanations. They met daily in various locations around the station, sometimes in formal meeting rooms, other times in the human embassy's common areas where Tyrex could observe humans interacting naturally. The human embassy was unlike any diplomatic facility Tyrex had ever visited. Instead of the austere professional atmosphere he expected, it felt almost residential. There were personal touches everywhere, photographs of places and people on Earth, plants growing in carefully maintained containers, even what Sarah called artwork displayed on the walls. Humans need this, Sarah explained as they walked through a corridor decorated with images of Earth's landscapes. We're social creatures, but we're also individuals. We need reminders of home, of the people and places we care about. Tyrex studied a particular image showing a vast body of water with waves crashing against rocky shores. This is from Earth? The Pacific Ocean near where I grew up, Sarah said, a note of fondness in her voice. I haven't been back in 3 years. Sometimes I stand here and just remember what it felt like to hear those waves. This casual admission of vulnerability surprised Tyrex. The briefings had never mentioned that humans experienced homesickness or that they might miss their planet. They had spoken only of human aggression and unpredictability, never of their capacity for nostalgia or sentiment. Over meals in the embassy's dining facility, Tyrex met other humans. There was Commander Marcus Webb, head of the embassy's small security detail, a large man with scars on his hands and a gentle manner that contradicted his intimidating appearance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez worked in the medical bay, a slight woman with quick hands and a ready laugh. Engineer David Okonkwo maintained the embassy's systems, and he possessed an infectious enthusiasm for his work that reminded Tyrex of young Quillen technicians. Each human Tyrex met challenged the stories he had heard. They were individuals as different from each other as any group of Quillen. Some were quiet and contemplative, others loud and gregarious. They argued about trivial matters, laughed at shared jokes, and showed concern for each other's well-being in ways that seemed entirely natural. You seem puzzled, Sarah observed one afternoon as they sat in her office reviewing cultural exchange protocols. Tyrex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. I'm trying to reconcile what I see with what I was told. The humans here are nothing like the monsters from the stories. Sarah set down her datapad and leaned back in her chair. Tell me one of the stories. I'd like to understand what you were taught about us. Tyrex hesitated, then decided honesty was appropriate. We were told about the Krovan War, about how humans fought with injuries that should have killed them, how they never surrendered even when defeat was certain. We were shown recordings of human soldiers screaming battle cries that terrified their enemies. Sarah's expression grew serious. That happened, all of it. The Krovan attacked our colony on Kepler 7. They killed 3,000 civilians, mostly families, before we could respond. What followed was war, and yes, we fought with everything we had. But why? Tyrex asked. Why not negotiate? Why not seek a peaceful resolution? We tried, Sarah said quietly. We sent diplomats first. The Krovan killed them and sent us a message saying humans were weak and would make good slaves. At that point, negotiation was no longer possible. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the stars. Let me tell you what the stories don't mention. After the war ended, after we had defeated the Krovan military, do you know what we did? Tyrex waited, his attention completely focused on her words. We helped them rebuild, Sarah continued. We sent engineers, medical supplies, food. We helped establish a new government, one that wouldn't attack its neighbors. We spent billions of credits and countless hours helping the very people who had tried to enslave us. This information wasn't in any of Tyrex's briefings. Why would you do that? Sarah turned to face him. Because the war was with their government and military, not with their people. Because Krovan civilians didn't deserve to starve because their leaders made terrible decisions. Because that's what you do when the fighting is over. You help rebuild. Before Tyrex could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. Sarah's relaxed demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by focused alertness. She moved to her communication panel, her movements quick and efficient. This is Ambassador Chen. What's our situation? A voice crackled through the speaker, tense and hurried. Station security. We've received a distress call from a refugee convoy in Sector 7. They're under attack by pirate forces. Multiple ships, heavy weapons. The convoy has minimal defenses. Sarah's jaw tightened. How many refugees? Approximately 2,000 mixed species. Families fleeing the conflict in the outer reaches. Response time from station security? 45 minutes minimum. The convoy won't last that long. Sarah was silent for exactly 3 seconds, and Tyrex watched as something changed in her expression. The friendly diplomat disappeared, replaced by something harder, more focused. This was the human from the stories, the creature capable of swift and decisive action. Emergency Protocol 7, Sarah commanded. Activate all diplomatic corps personnel with military training. I want our ship prepped and ready to launch in 10 minutes. Ambassador, you're not authorized for military operations. Those are families out there. Commander, children, we have the capability to help, and we're close enough to make a difference. I'm not sitting here while people die because of bureaucratic protocols. Prep the ship. She cut the communication and turned to Tyrex. I'm sorry, but I need to go. Feel free to remain here in the embassy or return to your quarters. You're going to fight the pirates? Tyrex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm going to save those refugees, Sarah corrected. Fighting the pirates is just what's necessary to accomplish that. She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at him. You're welcome to come as an observer if you want. It might help you understand us better. But I won't lie to you. It could be dangerous. Tyrex felt fear course through his system. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse to stay safe in the embassy. But he also felt something else, something he couldn't quite name. Curiosity, perhaps, or a desire to truly understand these confusing creatures. I will come, he heard himself say. 20 minutes later, Tyrex found himself secured in the observer station aboard the human diplomatic vessel Rising Phoenix. The ship was small but well-equipped, designed for both diplomatic missions and emergency response. Sarah sat in the command chair, her earlier warmth completely absent, replaced by cool professionalism. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Commander Webb handled weapon systems. Dr. Rodriguez prepared the medical bay. Engineer Okonkwo monitored the engines. There were 8 humans total, none of them professional soldiers, all of them volunteers who had dropped everything to attempt this rescue. Status? Sarah asked as they cleared the station. 3 pirate vessels confirmed, Webb reported. Light cruiser-class heavy weapons. The convoy has 2 small escorts, both badly damaged. They're not going to last much longer. Time to intercept? 12 minutes at maximum speed, Sarah nodded. Elena, coordinate with the convoy. Let them know help is coming. David, I need everything you can give me from the engines. You've got it, Ambassador. Tyrex watched in fascination as the humans worked. There was no panic, no hesitation. They had transformed from friendly diplomats into something else entirely. He could see now what the stories had described, that human focus and determination that made them so effective in crisis situations. Picking up increased weapons fire, Webb announced. The pirates are pressing their attack. One convoy escort just went dark. Sarah's hands gripped her armrests, but her voice remained steady. Faster, David. Already past recommended safety limits, but I'll push it more. The ship shuddered as the engine strained, but the humans seemed unconcerned. They were entirely focused on reaching the convoy in time. Tyrex felt his fear mounting, but he also felt something else. These humans were risking their lives for strangers, beings they had never met, whose species they might not even recognize. Coming up on the convoy, Webb announced. Pirates have visual on us. They're breaking off their attack on the refugees and redirecting toward us. Good, Sarah said coldly. That means they're not shooting at families anymore. The rising Phoenix entered weapons range, and Tyrex witnessed human combat capability firsthand. The ship moved with agility that seemed to defy its mass, dancing between enemy fire while delivering precise strikes against the pirate vessels. Webb called out targets in rapid succession, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. But what struck Tyrex most wasn't the fighting itself. It was the constant updates about the convoy's status. Even in the midst of combat, Sarah never stopped asking about the refugees. Were they clear? Were they moving to safety? Were there any casualties? The battle lasted 7 minutes. The pirates, expecting easy prey, found themselves facing humans who fought with controlled fury. One pirate ship was disabled, its engines destroyed by precise weapons fire. Another retreated entirely, unwilling to face opponents who actually fought back. The third tried to flee but found its escape route blocked by the rising Phoenix. Stand down, Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. Stand down now or we will destroy you. The pirate captain responded with weapons fire. It was a mistake. Webb's return fire was surgical, targeting only the ship's weapon systems and engines, leaving life support intact. The pirate vessel went dark, helpless but not destroyed. Secure that ship, Sarah ordered. Make sure their crew is alive and unharmed. As the immediate crisis passed, Tyrex watched the humans shift gears again. The warriors disappeared, replaced by rescuers and medics. The rising Phoenix moved alongside the damaged convoy, and Dr. Rodriguez began coordinating medical assistance for the wounded. Tyrex accompanied Sarah as she personally visited the refugee ships. What he saw there completed his transformation of understanding. The humans moved among the frightened civilians with gentleness and compassion. They treated injured children with tender care. They offered comfort to traumatized families. They shared their own supplies without hesitation. A young Minthari child, no more than 3 solar cycles old, had been injured in the attack. Dr. Rodriguez worked on the child with hands that showed no sign of the weapons they had controlled just minutes before. She spoke softly to the frightened parent, explaining every action, offering reassurance. You saved us, the parent said, their voice breaking with emotion. The humans saved us. Elena looked up from her work and Tyrex saw tears in her eyes. That's what people do, she said simply. We help each other. Hours later, after the refugees had been safely escorted to the station and the pirate crew had been turned over to authorities, Tyrex stood with Sarah on the observation deck of the rising Phoenix. The station was visible in the distance, a small point of light against the infinite darkness. Now you've seen both sides, Sarah said quietly. The monster and the guardian. They're both real. They're both part of who we are. Tyrex processed everything he had witnessed, the transformation from diplomat to warrior and back again. The precise violence followed immediately by gentle compassion. The willingness to risk everything for strangers combined with the insistence on preserving even enemy lives when possible. I think I am beginning to understand, Tyrex said slowly. The stories were true but incomplete. Humans are capable of terrible things, but only in service of something greater. Sarah nodded. We fight when we have to, but we fight for something. For protection, for justice, for those who can't protect themselves. The rage and violence exist, but they're tools, not our nature. Our nature is what you saw after the battle, helping, healing, making things better. Why didn't the other species explain this? Tyrex asked. Why tell only the frightening stories? Because fear is easier to understand than complexity, Sarah replied. It's simpler to call us monsters than to acknowledge that we're complicated, that we can be both fierce and gentle, both warriors and caregivers. She turned to face him fully. The question isn't whether humans are monsters. The question is what kind of monsters we choose to be. Monsters who destroy for pleasure, or monsters who fight to protect the innocent. We chose the latter, even if it costs us everything. Tyrex felt his entire worldview shifting. The humans weren't the simple creatures of rage from the stories. They were something far more complex and, in a way, far more remarkable. They had taken their capacity for violence and channeled it into protection. They had embraced their own nature and made it something worthwhile. I must report this to my people, Tyrex said. They need to know the truth. Sarah smiled, that genuine expression that had first surprised him. That's all we've ever wanted. Understanding. Not fear, not worship. Just understanding of who we really are. As Tyrex looked out at the stars, he realized that his mission had transformed from a diplomatic assignment into something far more significant. He would return to his people not with warnings about human monsters, but with a more complete truth. Humans were capable of monstrosity, yes, but they were also capable of profound compassion, and perhaps that combination was what made them truly special. The understanding. The medical bay of the diplomatic station hummed with quiet activity. Tyrex stood in the observation area, watching through transparent barriers as Dr. Elena Rodriguez and her team worked on the wounded from the pirate attack. What caught his attention most was not the humans working on the refugees, which he had expected, but the 3 pirate crew members receiving equally careful treatment in adjacent rooms. We treat everyone, Elena had explained when Tyrex expressed his confusion. Enemy or friend, it doesn't matter once the fighting stops. They're patients then, not combatants. One of the pirates, a Krell male with severe burns from the weapons fire, had regained consciousness during treatment. Tyrex watched as the creature tried to strike Elena, fear and rage evident in his movements. She had simply stepped back, waited for him to exhaust himself, and then approached again with calm determination. I know you're scared, she said through the translation device, but I'm trying to help you. Those burns need treatment or you'll lose function in that arm. Will you let me work? The Krell stared at her with obvious confusion. You fought us. You defeated us. Why help now? Elena had paused, considering her answer carefully. Because the fight is over. You lost and now you're hurt. What kind of people would we be if we let you suffer when we have the ability to help? The Krell had no response to that, and after a long moment he allowed her to continue treatment. Tyrex watched the interaction with growing understanding. This was the complexity Sarah had spoken about. Humans could shift from warriors to healers not despite their nature, but because of it. They fought fiercely to protect, and once the threat was neutralized, that same protective instinct extended even to those who had been enemies. Later that day, Tyrex attended a briefing where Sarah and Commander Webb reported to the station's Security Council about the incident. The council consisted of representatives from various species, all interested in understanding how a diplomatic vessel had ended up in combat. Your actions, while successful, were highly irregular, a Varath counselor stated. Diplomatic vessels are not authorized for military operations. The operation wasn't military, Sarah replied calmly. It was humanitarian. We responded to a distress call within our capabilities and saved 2,000 lives. You also engaged in combat with pirate vessels. Only because they chose to continue their attack. We offered them the opportunity to withdraw peacefully. They declined. A Quilan counselor older than the elders Tyrex knew from his homeworld leaned forward. Ambassador Chen, many species in this region are concerned about human expansion and influence. Actions like this, while admirable in intent, fuel fears about human military capability and willingness to use force. Sarah met the counselor's gaze directly. With respect, counselor, I understand those concerns, but I need you to understand something about humans. We will always respond when we see people in danger. Always. That's not negotiable. If that frightens other species, then we need to work on building trust and understanding, not on asking us to ignore suffering. Galactic stability that requires us to watch families die while we have the power to help isn't stability worth preserving, Sarah said firmly. We'll work within established protocols whenever possible. But when those protocols mean innocent people suffer, we'll find another way. The briefing continued for another hour, but Tyrex found his attention drifting to the humans in the room. They sat calmly under criticism and questioning, never becoming defensive or aggressive. They answered every concern with patience and clarity. They were clearly willing to work within the existing systems, but they were equally clear about their boundaries. After the briefing, Tyrex requested a private meeting with Sarah in her office. She agreed immediately, and soon they sat in the familiar setting where they had shared so many conversations over the past weeks. You were troubled by something in the briefing, Sarah observed. I could tell. Tyrex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The other counselors fear you. Even after witnessing your actions, even after seeing you save lives, they fear what humans might do. Does that surprise you? It does, Tyrex admitted. You demonstrated both your capability and your restraint. You fought only as much as necessary and showed compassion to everyone, including your enemies. What more could you do to ease their concerns? Sarah sighed, and Tyrex saw genuine weariness in her expression. Time, maybe. Trust building. But Tyrex, you need to understand something important. We can't make everyone comfortable with our existence. We can be as gentle, as careful, as diplomatic as possible, and some species will still fear us because of what we're capable of, not what we actually do. That seems unjust. It is what it is, Sarah replied. Every species judges others by their capabilities, not just their intentions. We have the capacity for tremendous violence, and that capacity will always frighten those who don't understand why we possess it. She stood and moved to her window, gazing out at the stars. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us constantly. Natural predators, diseases, natural disasters, scarcity of resources. We developed our combat abilities because we needed them to survive. But we also developed strong social bonds, empathy, and cooperation because we couldn't survive alone. A paradox, Tyrex suggested. A balance, Sarah corrected. We're dangerous when we need to be. But we're also the species that will risk everything to save strangers. Both aspects come from the same source. We care deeply about protecting our group, and we've expanded our definition of our group to include anyone who needs help. Over the following weeks, Tyrex continued his cultural exchange program with renewed purpose. He attended human cultural events, from the simple pleasure of movie nights in the embassy common room to more formal presentations about Earth's history and diverse civilizations. Each experience added layers to his understanding. He learned about human art, which ranged from paintings and sculptures to music and dance. He discovered that humans created beauty, not for any practical purpose, but simply because the act of creation brought them joy. He attended a concert where a human musician played something called a violin, and the haunting melody moved him in ways he hadn't expected. He studied human literature, reading stories they had written about themselves. Some were tales of heroism and adventure. Others explored quiet moments of human connection. He found himself particularly drawn to their philosophy, the endless questioning of existence, morality, and purpose that seemed central to human thought. "Why do you question everything?" he asked Sarah one day as they discussed human philosophical traditions. "My people accept the wisdom of our elders and the traditions of our ancestors, but humans constantly challenge and re-examine even the most fundamental beliefs. Because we're never satisfied with 'because I said so' as an answer," Sarah explained. "We need to understand why. Even if we eventually agree with tradition, we need to arrive at that conclusion ourselves. It's frustrating sometimes, and it means we make mistakes, but it also means we're always growing and learning." One evening, Tyrex joined several humans for what they called a poker night in the embassy common room. Commander Webb, Dr. Rodriguez, Engineer Okonkwo, and 3 other embassy staff members sat around a table with cards and small tokens they used for betting. "You understand the rules?" Webb asked as Tyrex settled into a specially designed chair. "I believe so. The objective is to create the best combination of cards or to convince others that you have the best combination even if you do not." Elena laughed. "That's poker in a nutshell. Skill and bluffing." As they played, Tyrex observed the humans carefully. They joked with each other, told stories between hands, and maintained a friendly competition that never became hostile. When Tyrex won a hand through what Webb called an excellent bluff, they congratulated him genuinely. "You're a natural," David said with a grin. We might need to watch out for the ambassador here. These casual moments taught Tyrex as much as the formal presentations had. He saw how humans built relationships through shared activities. He observed their humor, which often involved gentle teasing of friends, self-deprecating jokes, or clever wordplay. He witnessed their genuine pleasure in simple companionship, but it was a conversation with Commander Webb that brought everything into focus. They stood together on an observation deck late one night, watching ships come and go from the station. "You know what confused me most about humans?" Tyrex said. "The violence and compassion existing together. How can the same person who fights so fiercely also care so deeply?" Webb was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "My father once told me something that stuck with me. He said that if you're not willing to fight for something, you don't really care about it. True caring means being willing to protect what matters even if it costs you. But where is the line? How do you know when to fight and when to seek peace?" "That's the hard part," Webb admitted. "And humans struggle with it constantly. We get it wrong sometimes. We fight when we should talk or talk when we should act, but we keep trying to find that balance." He turned to face Tyrex directly. "Here's what I think makes humans different, though. We don't fight because we enjoy destruction. We fight because we've seen what happens when good people do nothing while bad things occur. Every human grows up learning history, seeing examples of times when people stood by while atrocities happened. We decided as a species that we wouldn't be those people. Even at great cost? Especially at great cost," Webb said firmly. "Easy sacrifices aren't really sacrifices. It only means something when it's hard, when it requires us to risk something we value." As Tyrex's assignment drew toward its conclusion, he prepared his final report for the Quillen Collective. He spent days organizing his thoughts, reviewing his recordings and notes, trying to capture the complexity of what he had learned. Sarah invited him to her office for a farewell meeting on his last day at the station. The space had become familiar to him, a place where he had learned more about humans than all his briefings combined. "You'll be leaving tomorrow," Sarah said, her voice carrying a note of genuine sadness. "I've enjoyed our time together." "As have I," Tyrex replied. "You have given me a gift, Ambassador Chen. Understanding." "And what understanding will you take home?" Tyrex considered his answer carefully. "That humans are precisely as dangerous as the stories claim, but dangerous in the service of something greater. That your capacity for violence is matched by your capacity for compassion. That you are complicated creatures who cannot be easily categorized or predicted." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But most importantly, I learned that the question other species should ask isn't, are humans dangerous, but rather, what do humans care about? Because once you understand what humans value, their actions become predictable. They will always fight to protect the innocent. They will always help those in need. They will always stand against injustice, even at great personal cost." Sarah's eyes grew bright with emotion. "That might be the most insightful thing anyone's ever said about us." "I will tell my people the truth," Tyrex continued. "That humans are not the simple monsters from the stories. They are guardians who have learned to be monstrous when necessary, and the galaxy is safer for their existence, even if it is also more complicated." Sarah stood and extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell. Tyrex took it, no longer fearful of the contact, but appreciating it as the gesture of respect and friendship it represented. "One last question," Tyrex said before leaving. "That smile when we first met. You knew I was frightened of you." "Why smile?" Sarah's expression softened into that same warm smile he remembered from their first meeting. "Because I wanted to show you that humans could be kind before I showed you that we could be fierce. I wanted your first impression of us to be hope, not fear. Did it work?" Tyrex felt his crystalline form glow with what humans called amusement. "It worked perfectly. I spent weeks trying to reconcile that smile with the stories of human ferocity. That contradiction forced me to look deeper, to see the whole truth instead of just the frightening parts. Then it was exactly the right choice," Sarah said. The next day, as Tyrex's ship departed the station, he took one last look at the human embassy through his viewport. He could see humans moving about their daily routines, living their complicated lives, being both fierce and gentle as circumstances required. His report to the Quillen Collective would be controversial. Many would resist his conclusions, preferring the simple narrative of human danger to the complex reality he had discovered. But Tyrex was determined to speak truth, to help his people understand that humans were not the enemy to be feared, but potential allies to be valued. 3 months after Tyrex returned home, the Quaylen Collective officially opened diplomatic relations with Earth. The vote had been close, with many elders arguing against increased human contact, but Tyrex's detailed reports, combined with similar accounts from other species who had taken the time to truly understand humans, had made the case. Elder Xynthia personally informed Tyrex of the decision. "Your report was instrumental," she said. "You helped us see past our fears to the potential for cooperation." "I simply told the truth," Tyrex replied. "Humans are dangerous, but they are dangerous in the service of protection and justice. As long as we understand what they care about, we can work with them. The humans have requested that you serve as our ambassador to their diplomatic corps," Elder Xynthia continued. "Will you accept?" Tyrex felt his crystalline form glow with something humans would recognize as joy. "Yes, I will accept." 6 months later, Ambassador Tyrex stood in a conference room on Earth itself, looking out at the blue planet that had produced humanity. Sarah Chen stood beside him, now serving as the human liaison to Quillen affairs. "Nervous?" she asked. "Excited," Tyrex corrected. "I have learned much about humans, but there is always more to discover." Sarah smiled, that expression that had once confused him but now conveyed so much warmth and friendship. "That's the thing about humans. We're constantly evolving, constantly changing. You'll never finish learning about us." "Good," Tyrex said simply. As they prepared for the formal alliance signing ceremony, Tyrex reflected on his journey from fearful diplomat to human advocate. He had learned that the stories were true but incomplete. Humans were monsters, but they were monsters who chose to be guardians. They were dangerous, but dangerous only to those who threatened innocence. And they were capable of smiles that could change minds, bridge differences, and transform fear into understanding. The ceremony began, and as Tyrex watched humans and Quillen formally commit to cooperation and friendship, he thought about that first smile. It had been an offering of hope, a promise that humans could be more than the monsters from the stories. And that promise had proven true in ways Tyrex could never have imagined. The galaxy was indeed more complicated with humans in it, but it was also safer, kinder, and full of possibilities that hadn't existed before. And all of it had begun with a simple gesture, a smile that said humans were ready to be understood, not just feared. As the ceremony concluded and representatives from both species mingled peacefully, Tyrex felt profound gratitude. He had been given an assignment that terrified him, forced to confront creatures from his worst nightmares. But in facing that fear, he had discovered something precious: understanding. And that understanding, more than any weapon or technology, was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. The gift of being known truly, completely, both the fierce and the gentle aspects together. The gift of being complex, contradictory, and utterly, wonderfully human.